Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Alberta Canola Producers Commission, SAS Canola, and Manitoba Canola Growers.
All right, so we're here at Canola Lab in Saskatoon, and I'm with Angela Brackenreed, and you're standing in front of a demonstration of 1,000 kernel weights. Do most growers use 1,000 kernel weight?
I think it's starting to become more common for growers to check. Every canola bag now has 1,000 kernel weight on the seed tag, but it is still pretty common practice for growers to seed their canola at 5 pounds across the board. We saw from our grower survey that that really is the most common practice. So moving from field to field, different seed lot from different seed lot, growers are sticking with that 5 pound seeding rate.
So why should they be changing to 1,000 kernel weight or 1,000 seed weight?
Well, I think it's important to know the 1,000 kernel weight because you can see here we have 2.8 grams per thousand, and then here we have 7.5 grams per thousand, and that's a huge variance, and those are variances that you could very well see on your own farm. So if you're moving from field to field, one with a 2.8 gram per thousand, and then sticking to that 5 pounds and seeding with the 7.5 grams per thousand, there's a huge difference there. You can have far fewer seeds with that 7.5 grams per thousand. So if you take a look at this tub, it's a really good visual to show you. This whole thing was seeded at 5 pounds with a 6-inch spacing, and you can see that the bigger seed here, there is just far fewer plants than there is with this smaller seed here. And bearing in mind that in a greenhouse setting where these were grown out, we're looking at like 98% establishment, whereas in a real world situation, unfortunately, our average survivability is more like 50 to 60%. So just really important when you're looking at that bigger seed, you may want to consider bumping up your seeding rates. I think kind of a general rule of thumb when you're seeding your canola and moving from field to field is look at that 1,000 kernel weight and consider recalibrating and maybe changing seeding rates if you have a gram per thousand difference.
Okay. Have you seen any difference in the seed weight vigor or the seed size in vigor?
In terms of vigor?
Yeah,
that's a really good question and something that producers ask us a lot about. I think every producer wants to know, is there a certain magic number that I should be targeting? There is some research, it's getting a little bit older now, but it did point to the larger seed being more vigorous. In that research, we didn't have any seed that was bigger than that 5 gram per thousand range. So we're not entirely sure when it starts to get bigger, and we have in recent years been seeing a trend to some of that bigger seeds. So that will be interesting to see with newer research if there is a correlation between vigor and yield with that seed that's upwards of 7.5 grams per thousand. But back to the research that I referred to. The seed that was bigger did show greater vigor and maybe better emergence, but it didn't always turn into better yield at the end of the day. The situation where they did see increased yield was if there was heavy flea beetle infestation. The larger seed did produce higher yield at the end of the day, but in the absence of flea beetles, although it did proved to be more vigorous, it didn't necessarily produce the yield at the end of the day, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, the 1,000 kernel weight is shown on the bags. You
Yes.
say that if it changes by 1 gram, just 1 gram, we should calibrate again?
Yeah, I think so, and there's no science really behind that. I think it's just a good rule of thumb. Ideally, we would be recalibrating our drill every single time we're using a new seed lot with a different 1,000 kernel weight, but the spring is so busy and time is definitely of the essence. So I think that's just a good rule to go by is for if you're seeing that gram change, then maybe you should consider a different seeding rate and recalibrating your drill.